Hey friends, so excited to welcome Steph Garcia to the podcast. Welcome to the show, Steph.
So good to be with you, Lindsey. I'm such a big fan of you, of the podcast, of the Empire, and of course, of running and track and field and all of the fun stuff we're going to talk about. So I'm pleased to be here.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Tell me, how are you enjoying watching the trials right now?
It is, it's emotional. It is so emotional. And I am actually going to be down there for the final weekend. I'm based in the Pacific Northwest. A friend and I and our toddler boys are going to go down and be in Hayward for the final weekend. And I am already getting tears in my eyes thinking about those moments and watching those athletes achieve their dream or not achieve their dream, because that is part of the story of the Olympic trials too. So it's so exciting to watch. I love seeing the next generation of Olympians come.
It is so exciting. You're so right. To see the emotions on both sides there. I have to ask you then, based on what you just said and based on your Olympic trials experience, your fall in 2016 and being fifth at the trials, what did your heart do when did you know what I was going to ask?
Oh,
fell?
Yeah.
Which somebody always falls at the 800.
Always. I had a training partner back in 2012 fall in the 800 in the rounds, and I don't think she had the standard at the time, but anyone who makes it to the trials and you're on the starting line and you get that chance. I'm thinking back to Leah O'Connor. That's not her married. She's married now, but thinking of her,
Fallon, yeah,
having a fall on the barrier, all of those.
That was heartbreaking.
It's heartbreak. There's heartbreak in every single Olympic trials, in every race. Think of people who had their shoes come untied in the 5K or the 10K or anything like that. Yeah. So
you had a really beautiful post about that, though. Not about the fall, but just about your experience and not being an Olympian or being an Olympian. That doesn't define the athlete that you are. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think that there's only a few people who get to be an Olympian. That's just the way it goes. But that doesn't mean that everyone else doesn't have a valid or exciting or fulfilling career. I think about the folks of my generation, the Steph Bruces of the world, the Sarah Halls of the world, who have done amazing things. Certainly not trying to compare myself to Sarah Hall's accomplishments, but just to say that you can accomplish so much, you can set records, you can be a champion and still not be an Olympian. And that doesn't make your experience any less valid or to be celebrated. I think that when we meet folks out in the world who aren't part of the track and field ecosystem and they say, oh, wow, you were a pro, so you went to the Olympics. And it's hard to kind of explain, well, no, but I ran this time and I did this thing. And, those are super exciting and, again, fulfilling. I'm going to use that word those are fulfilling aspects of any career. And so we don't go up to, an accountant and say, hey, were you one of the top 0.1% accountants? And, oh, you weren't. So why are you working?
Well, I was just thinking that with basketball players. Think about how many pro basketball players there are and how few of them actually play on the Olympic team, but we're still oh, he's a pro basketball player. That's a big deal.
Absolutely. Or how many people are NFL players and don't win a Super Bowl? They don't get a ring. And that doesn't mean that they didn't have a really cool and awesome career full of wins and failures. And that's just part of it. I think that you didn't ask this question yet, but if there was something that I would want everyone to know and embrace about their life experience, is that failure is part of it. It is not linear, and to expect it to be so is unrealistic. And we see some of these amazing athletes go from 0 to 100 in overnight successes, but we don't see all the work that's gone in behind the scenes, or we don't see, maybe they did have a connection or an opportunity. It's different with athletics because you do have to actually run the race and run the time, but for jobs or whatever, there's usually a lot of work that goes in that you don't see.
Totally. Well, I'm glad you said that, because even though I hadn't asked it yet, I was thinking about where do I throw in, what would your message be to Well, I was actually thinking like, you know, who was like Sage, you know, in the 800. Like, I was thinking like, what would you say to her? Well, she's still got to go run the 15, so hopefully she has a great race. But like, you know, I saw her post-race interview and she was pissed. She was just pissed. How do you pick yourself back up from that heartbreak? Like, give yourself time to grieve it, but then be like, it's okay. My career is still valid and I still have so much more I want to go do.
I think for me, specifically about 2016 and missing that team, and I want to like, for people who didn't
yeah, go ahead.
young back in those days, didn't pay attention. Like I was, you know, near the front for a lot of that race. I was in position and going into the final lap, I was in second place. And so then to have two girls pass me, fall, and then have another girl pass me. I mean, at that point it was over, but, you know, it's what I would say to myself in reflecting back, like I didn't take time to grieve. I just kept moving forward, like moving forward, using failure to propel you to the next thing. I knew I was really fit. I knew there was some other goals that I had. This again, these times are going to sound silly in the context of today and super shoes, but back then only 3 women had broken 9:20 in the steeple, and that was like that was still it was a really big barrier, and yeah. I knew I could break that time. And so for me, immediately after falling, you know, going through the mix zone, crying with my coach, I was like, okay, now I need to go get an Epsom salt bath, and I need to fuel, and I need to hydrate, and I need to get ready because I'm going to go to Europe and I'm going to race in some diamond leagues, and I'm going to do these things because I'm going to break 9:20. That's going to be my big goal. And I did that summer. And I remember having some friends and peers around me saying like, why aren't you crying? Why aren't you angry? Like drink a bottle of wine, just lose it. And I'm like, no, because I still have things that I'm going to go do. And so I'm not saying that's the healthiest way to, you know, maybe I should have had a big glass of wine instead. But I think that using failure, it's only a failure if you don't learn from it.
Yeah. It's so hard. And also I feel like there's a lot of embarrassment with failure because people, like, you put your dreams out there and then people expect X, Y, and Z, and then it doesn't happen. And you're like, oh, did you feel that at all?
I'm going to have a confession. During my pro career, especially when I was running really well, I would never promote that I was running a race. Like, you know, just whatever, any race, going to a diamond league, I wouldn't start talking about it until maybe like the day of, like, oh, I'm hopping into the Shanghai Diamond League, whatever it is, because I didn't want to put it out there and have anyone, even if it was like my mom, you know, one person pay attention. And then, oh, what if I had a bad race? Yep. Then I would be really embarrassed because I was like, oh, look at me, I'm going to this race. And then I, you know, had a DNF or so, you know, something like that. I would be really embarrassed. And so that's very true. That's definitely a feeling that we all get of like that embarrassment and that shame.
That's interesting because I feel like in today's world, everything's so out there, and like everyday athletes, you know, there's like tracking for races and everything like that. And it's like both. You can use that, everybody knows I'm running this marathon and can track me as like motivation, you know, like at mile 18 when you're like, oh, this sucks. But then you're like, but people are going to see my split at the 20-mile mark, you know? Or it can internalize as like really big pressure and just like come crashing down on you. And it probably just depends on what kind of person you are, like how you process things.
Yeah, as like a perfectionist kind of person, I was the second thing. Like, it would be too much pressure on me. I know that like the mental side of it started really getting to me towards the end when I was in the final years of my steeple. Fast forward to 2017 U.S. Championships. There's a world team to make. I fall again in the water. So, you know, it really messed with my head. And so much of it was just the pressure I was putting on myself. I'm sure no one else really was paying that close of attention to the women's steeple at that point, but yeah, it's real. So just finding ways to kind of work within the system that's going to work for you. Like that's my advice there. And going back to your earlier question about like what would I say to someone like Sage, like it's okay to feel what you're feeling is what I would say. Feel angry, feel awful, like get your team around you, get in your protected bubble and get yourself, fill your cup back up, get away from, and it's different for Sage. She's going to go back and run again.
Yeah.
But for some folks who are kind of devastated by their experience at the trials specifically, it's okay to take a step away for a week, for a month, take time off, do what you need to do if that's how you want to process it. You're not a failure, and there's more. And even if maybe this was like your last go at the trials, if you're maybe an older athlete or you're just going to do something different with your life, this will always be part of your story. Make it make it the cliffhanger ending to the next chapter of your life. Yeah.
Well, I know I'm thinking about Sage too. When you answer that question, I'm like, she is still really young. So like this won't be her last Olympic trials. But also, I was also thinking, go do that Brenda Martinez thing. Because do you remember when Brenda fell in the 800 and then made the team in the 15? Was that 2016?
It was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like that is a possibility. Like that can happen for you. I know that 1500 field is just crazy stacked, but it's always crazy stacked.
Always. I was just going to say that when Brenda made it, it was crazy stacked too. So,
yeah.
And everyone who makes it to the trials has earned their way there.
Yeah.
So everyone has a shot. And that's the beauty and the heartbreak of the way that the U.S. does it.
You mentioned super shoes, and I'm like, oh, you are the perfect person to talk to about this because you really are on that like line there. Like, I've talked to athletes who are like Des and Sarah who are like still racing and raced through it before, but like and then you've got people that are really old school that weren't even anywhere close to when super shoes came out, but you're like right there. You were like right there before. And so I'm just curious, like, your thoughts on all that, because we always think that, like, with asterisks, aside from, like Dina Castor's, I always say, like, Dina Castor's marathon American record before it was broken, like, there will always, in my mind, be that, like, this was pre-super shoes because it held for over 20 years, But, like, anyway, I'm just curious your thoughts on this as someone who didn't get to enter that era.
It's tough. I see the times now, especially for, again, women's steeple and knowing that they have totally different spikes than I had. There's a little bit of like, I don't like to use the word like envy or jealousy, but I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have tried that. Like, I'm so impressed to see, girls at the NCAA level just blowing by the times that back in my day, like if you break 10, you were like a superstar. And now it's like, did you break 9:30?
Yeah.
Or you're not making a final at NCAAs or whatever. It's just kind of that, like, every era has their own thing and their new whatever training device or method or track surface or whatever. And so this is what's happening. I did try Vaporflies for my first marathon, my first road marathon, and loved them. So
really?
Yeah, I think super shoes, we have to keep evolving with the time. And so I don't want there to be like an asterisk next to like, oh, these times, like everything, again, keeping with the theme of like, you're valid and worthy, like everything is part of it, and that's just the way the sport goes, right? Yeah, for sure.
Wait, talk to us about your road marathon.
Oh, I hopped into CIM. I did. You will understand this. I had a baby, and I have been curious about the marathon. So I set CIM as my goal. My kiddo was born August 2022. Okay. So so it was a while, but
it's like a year. Wait, how old was your child?
He was what, 15 months, 14 months.
Okay.
But I'm going to be honest. It was a challenging experience.
Yeah.
Postpartum running is a very challenging thing. And for a couple of reasons. There's the physical side, of course. There's the support side, like, do you have a babysitter for your kid? How are you getting out to train? Are you breastfeeding? Is he in daycare? What does your life look like?
Yeah.
And your time commitment. For a marathon, you need time to go out and get those miles in. But then also what surprised me was like the emotional, mental side. Like I struggled to be away from my kiddo in those months. Even though I was fine to run, my body was coming back, feeling like myself again. I missed him. I felt anxious away from him, things like that. And so I definitely struggled with getting back into some consistent training when he was still kind of in that baby phase. So I learned a lot through that marathon experience. I changed my goals for it as I was going along. And you mentioned mile 18 when you're kind of struggling. For me, it was like mile 17. I stopped for like half a second, and in my head, I was like, well, like I don't have a phone with me. How is my husband going to find me? How am I going to get back to the finish line? I got to keep going. And,
yes.
Yeah, it was fun to have a first marathon experience. I've learned so much, especially about the training that I really do need to be successful there, to like actually give it a good attempt. And so I'm looking forward to one day doing another one.
You do want to do another one?
I do, because we're distance runners, Lindsey. We have a little bit of craziness in us where you do something challenging and then you want to go and conquer it. So
yeah, for sure. What were your goals, and what do you care if I ask what you ran?
No, I would say that before, when I was still pregnant, I thought, okay, I'm gonna run a marathon. I'm gonna qualify for the marathon trials, and I just want to go to the marathon trials. And just between all those things I was talking about, all the challenges, I just knew I wasn't in a fitness place for that. So I shifted gears and was like, okay, can I run in the 250s? Can I break 250? Can I get myself to a place where I can maybe get into like a semi-elite field and another marathon and work my way to getting closer to. I would love that is a goal, is to try and qualify for the marathon trials.
Okay.
Now it's the time to try again.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
That's a bucket list item for me.
What is that like, though, to line up when you've been like, you know what I mean? You've ran in the World Championships in 2015. You've obviously ran in the Olympic trials, and you've run with the best of the best. Like, were you like, hey, I'm just here? Like, were you just like low key, like put yourself in there?
I was low key, and we talked a little bit about like the pressure you put on yourself. This is definitely one that I did not talk about very much that I was going to do. And I had moments where I felt kind of embarrassed. Like I did get an elite bib. CIM was great, and it was a great experience, but I also had never been in a big road race before. I haven't done many road races. I've been so much on the track that I had no idea how many people would be around me, and like just there were and CIM's such a big one for that final qualifier.
Yes.
That there were so many people, and there was moments where I felt kind of embarrassed. I will tell you what helped me there. I channeled my inner steeplesquigs, Colleen Quigley, fellow steeplechaser, who's gone through a lot in her life over the last few years, and done some different things with training and racing. And I thought, what would Colleen do if she was in a race where she knew she wasn't quite ready, but she's there? And I'm like, she would have so much fun. She'd be waving. She'd be like just living it up and still trying, right? Not like jogging, but like taking up space. It's okay to take up space, even if you're a different version of yourself. And to bring it back to motherhood, I don't want to think like, oh, I'm a lesser version of myself because I'm a mom now. I'm a running mom. I don't train the same way or race the same way. It's okay. I'm a new version of myself, not a lesser version. And this version is valid too.
I love that. I love that you brought up Colleen too, because you're so right. Like jumping into triathlon, just like doing all these different things, and then just like using her platform in other ways that aren't necessarily like on the track steeplechasing. I love that so much. I kind of feel, when you brought up the mom thing, I kind of feel similar in a different way. And I don't know if it's age, but like I really, in my non-professional, very recreational running ways, like I really got after it so hard after I became a new mom. Like I ran crazy miles and like PR'd all my marathons and stuff, like in those really early motherhood days. And now I feel like now's the time where you should have more energy and like more drive because your kids are bigger, but like I actually don't feel like that. And I thought I would. And so I've for years have been trying to figure out, what does that mean for me? And like, what does it look like to still work really hard, but like maybe the goals are different, you know? It's interesting. Like life changes and you don't know what's going to happen or how you're going to feel.
Absolutely. That's like the tagline for parenthood is like, you have no idea how it's going to go until you're already in it. And I think that so much of my postpartum new mom experience has been just like to still feel worthy in wherever I am right now. I'm feeling like what you're feeling right now. I don't feel that same drive and urgency to go out and gobble up goals the same way. Doesn't mean I don't have goals, but my energy is poured so much into my kiddo, into my family, into my work now. I work now, not just run. So
yeah, like real job outside of professional running.
Yeah, real big girl job, and not I don't have any sponsorship support. I have none of that. I do have a coach who's awesome and cheers me on, but like I'm a totally different. I'm a normal non-elite runner now. And so I don't feel that same push, but I have faith that it's going to come back. And that's okay. That there's like, it's okay to have ebbs and flows in your motivation and in the way you approach it. Like I'm trying to still train, of course, and I still have races I'm jumping into and doing different things. I'm trying some trails. I would like to try some ultras. But that dream of like getting a marathon, another couple goes at the marathon, doing some half marathons, like running fast again is something I do want to do. And I'm just going to have faith that urgency and that like real fire is going to come back.
I'll say one more thing about my story and then go back to you because I always feel like don't talk too much about yourself, Lindsey, on these. But when we're talking about motherhood, I'm just like, I think that when my kids were really like your son's age, Steph has a 2-year-old. I almost think that I used the running hard and all that to like cope with how hard it was when they were so little. And maybe I don't need that as much now in those ways, like, because parenting is like so much less physically demanding than it used to be. And so I'm like, well, that was one of my coping mechanisms, you know? But anyway, I was going to ask you, when you bring up the trails and stuff, it's like, wow, someone like you who comes from such a speed background, like if you have that endurance piece too, like you could just like tear it up on the trails because you've got the speed too. But I'm like, what do? Do you go the way of Grayson Murphy and do like the shorter distance trail stuff?
Okay, here's one secret about trails that people forget. There's like hills and technical terrain, and so I am not a graceful runner. And so I need work on those real technical, rocky kind of terrains. That's not the trails that I've ever been around. Like, and so much of my track time, you avoid trails because if you twisted an ankle or you tumbled,
totally.
You could derail a race or even like part of a season. So it was we didn't risk that. Now it's like, throw yourself down a hill and see what happens. I'm very cautious on downhills. Actually, before getting pregnant, I did the like US mountain running championships at Mount Hood. And I hadn't really done a lot of hill work, but I thought, let's do this. Like I'm fit, I'm fast. I did pretty well on the way up. I was like in the top 10 on the way up the mountain. Down, I got passed by like 20 people. I'm not exaggerating. I think I finished like 30th because I could not send it on the hills like mountain runners can. They are amazing. I just am too worried about falling to my death. So.
Well, and it's like, who wants to be injured?
They're amazing. Like the like true mountain running athletes, men and women, are just so badass. I'm like in awe of them. And so it's really cool to find and learn about different running communities. You know, the ultra running world is different than the short trails.
Yes.
Than obstacle course racing, which I was jumping into. My husband's done. Like it's super cool to see all these different angles of running outside of just pure track and field.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the obstacle racing. So that's where you met your husband.
Yes.
Okay. When did you even get the idea to jump into it? And tell us a little bit about how much you've done it.
Yeah, I really haven't done it a lot recently. I kind of had like one little season of jumping in and learning because, surprise, surprise, as a track athlete, I did not have those like gymnastic skills to be like hanging from things and swinging and even like go to your playground and jump on monkey bars. Like, that's hard. I couldn't
so
do
hard.
it. That's not my skill. I can lift things. I can like carry big buckets or rocks or whatever, but the like swinging obstacles were really challenging for me. I failed them all. But I was excited to be a beginner again and to learn something new. And so back actually in 2015, 2016, when I was like at the height of my running, my track running, I had met this athlete, Amelia Boone. She was a lawyer turned obstacle course racer, was like one of the first women to like dominate in the sport because it's still pretty new and it's not in the Olympics or anything like that yet. And I was just so inspired by her. And so I said, when you're done with track running in a decade, like, let's do some OCR and just like see, because it seems like fun. I'm a steeplechaser. I want to do wild things and just like jump over things and jump in water. Like, that's in my DNA. So, once I did step back from the track, this was early 2021 and the reason I stepped back from the track was really just injuries and just getting older and just it was just time to be done. But I immediately jumped into this OCR and trail stuff and had a really fun year. And then I got pregnant. And so, you know, just the way the cycle of life has gone. And so I have done a couple of little trail races recently, and they've gone really well with limited training. And so I would say my next big goal, the next like thing I would love to do is to try a 50K.
Okay.
And see if not so much to like, I'm going to go and win, because training's very limited right now, just with like the time and the toddlerhood era. But I want to try a 50K, see how I do, learn a lot, and then figure out, okay, is this something I want to do more of and train more specifically for?
Yeah. And then how do you like set goals around that stuff now? Like, what matters most to you now?
In general, what matters most to me, it's a little bit like what you were mentioning as like a mother runner of like, is running like fulfilling my cup? Is this giving me like that release that I need as like a busy working mom? That's something like, that's a check, like a box I want to check every week of like, how did running feel for me? Did it feel like a pressure, stressful thing that I had to put on my to-do list? Or did it feel like something that like was awesome and I like had fun? I met with other fast mommies in the area and ran, like had a good run with my husband, like those things. But then there's, in the trail world and the ultra world, there are races that you want to like get to, you know. I have like a wish list of races all across the country, all across the world, that I'm like, I one day want to go to Arizona and do this crazy desert race, or I want to go to, you know, out here in the Pacific Northwest and do this crazy trail marathon, you know, whatever it is. It's like wanting to hit those, just like folks who do road marathons want to do, like they have their list of Chicago, Berlin, New York. It's kind of how it is on the trails.
I love the process of that. Like the process of being like, well, first and foremost, is this like satisfying? Is this not overwhelming? Am I enjoying this? Then it's those other buckets.
I remember one of my first obstacle course races. It was a Spartan race. It was in Pennsylvania, and like, you know, they have men and women running together. You're just kind of all out there. And I won for my age group for women, but one really steep climb, there was like a group of dudes around me, and I just said, "Why are we doing this?" And they were like, "Because we paid a lot to be here." And like, I was like, "Oh, that's a good point." And so I think about that a little bit in this, like, no one's paying me to do this. No one is expecting me to post on social with their stuff while I'm out on the trails. Like, I am doing this. I'm taking my time away from my family. I'm spending my money, whatever it is, to do this race or do this training. So I want to feel that like fulfillment from it in a different way than that, like, you have to have these time goals or hit these marks or whatever that you might feel if you had a sponsor, or if you had that like level of support.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in almost every marathon I've ever run, I'm like, you know, you get to that mile 18, you said 17 in your race, or 20 or 22, and you're like, why the heck am I doing this to myself? Like, what? But then you remind yourself, like, I'm doing this because I feel more alive when I do this. I'm doing this because I know how amazing I'm going to feel when it's over. Like, there's no other external validation or anything that I should be doing it for other than, like, I feel more alive when I work really hard.
Absolutely. Like, that's why we're in this whole life, right? To get real deep about it. But, you know, it's not just to be like a 9 to 5 or to just be, I'm just mom, or I'm just like a wife. Like, I have this intensity in me, and I'm going to let it out. And so whatever that is, it doesn't have to be running. It could be pickleball or whatnot, but just finding that thing for you. I think that's the key to happiness.
New Balance. You were sponsored by New Balance forever. And what does that feel like? Like, obviously you haven't been in that world for a little while now, but what does that feel like being totally outside of it at this point and being on the outside looking in? Like, we talked about the Olympic trials earlier, like seeing these athletes who have these brand obligations and all this stuff. What does that look like to you now?
So one thing that's really interesting, I work in college athletics, and the big change over the past few years is the name, image, likeness, so that college athletes can get deals, they can be entrepreneurs, they can get paid to play a concert, whatever it is. They can get paid where they couldn't before because they were an athlete and they were an amateur. And so I am really fired up seeing all the college runners getting these NIL deals with On or New Balance or anyone, and being able to make money while they're still a college athlete. I just think that's such a cool opportunity. And so, like, big applause to folks like New Balance and other brands who are taking advantage of this. Like, these athletes have big followings. They have a voice. They have an opinion. And they're running really amazing. They're making Olympic teams, or they're getting to the trials, which is a huge accomplishment, but especially when you're in college and you're balancing all the things. So to see them get the chance to experience that sponsorship life before having to dive all the way in and be a full pro, I think is a really cool opportunity. And so, yeah, I'm fired up. I will say, you're talking about the trials. New Balance always had the best house. They would bring a chef in. I still follow the chef JB, and he's been posting, Instagram stories about what he's cooking for everyone.
Aww.
I miss that a lot.
I know. I'm like, well, you're going to the final weekend. Can you just go be like, hey, JB, can I get a little omelet or something?
Yeah, where's the pancakes? No, he's probably. It'd be really fun. But yeah, I think, I know that some brands love to use their athletes in their marketing and stuff, and I think New Balance is doing a great job of that, especially with the Sydney McLaughlins, the new faces. They started doing that with us when they had a lot of women, Emma, Jenny, Brenda, Abby, all of those. Gosh, I think of my time as a sponsored athlete, and we just had the best roster.
You really did. Corey,
Emily Sisson, did I mention Jenny Simpson? Just all amazing. So, yeah, so cool, and it was just such a privilege to be part of that for 10 years. So,
yeah, wow, 10 years.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. When I talked to Jenny Simpson most recently and talked about her moving on from New Balance, I don't want to quote her because I won't say it exactly right, but she said something along the lines of like that was one of the greatest heartbreaks of her career is when her relationship as a sponsored athlete for them ended. And I imagine it was. What was that like for you? I don't remember when you retired, like you didn't make like a big announcement or anything.
No, it was a combination of, and I was still going to have some light support from them, but I really had been dealing with injuries. I hadn't really raced to my best potential for a little bit. And so it was just time to step back and not feel that pressure or obligation both ways, right? Like they didn't need to feel the obligation to keep giving me gear and, and a salary or anything. And I didn't want to feel that obligation to be. And they never had a contract like you hear with some athletes from other brands of like, you have to run these 10 races. Like it wasn't that intense for me. But, you just, when you're a sponsored athlete, you want to go and represent your brand and your team. And so, and it was shifting too. There were so many groups now, there's the team boss, there's just the New Balance Boston group, like they were definitely starting to shift their resources in a different way. So it just was the right time for me to say, hey, like, I know my contract's up, but I'm on an extension, but like, I think this is time to just, that being said, to go back to to Jenny's comment, it is such a great brand. Like their like corporate office is just, they're great people. They're true track fans. And especially in my era, it was just really had that family feel, which I can't speak to any other brand, but it was really an awesome experience.
Why did you decide to not like make some big announcement when you retired?
It probably goes back to what we were mentioning in the beginning, a little bit of that, like, I guess I'll use the word shame, or just like, I think I always, I don't quite know how to say this, but I think that I've always just felt like I'm not this big premier, like headline grabbing athlete. Like I have a great little following. I've got people who, support me, amazing coaches and peers, but I'm certainly not someone with hundreds of thousands of followers who are hanging on my every word. And so, and I also just knew that I was going to shift my priorities into some different kinds of racing, into having a big girl job, into having a family one day. And I just didn't want to feel like, I don't know, I wanted to just have everything evolve gradually and not have this hard, like, and it's over.
Yeah.
And so I knew I was going to still do some racing. It was just going to look different, and not be as much and not be as hardcore as the Olympic trials. But I just didn't feel like I needed to do a big, huge goodbye tour because I just didn't feel like I was that level of an athlete.
That's interesting that I get what you're saying and why you felt like that. I feel like that really relates to any career. I mean, as you were talking, I was feeling that to my soul about this podcast. I was like, well, if I just up and quit one day, like, what would I even say? Like, would anybody care? And like, I don't even like that those feelings were coming into my mind, but they were as you were saying that. And I'm sure there's lots of people that feel that like deeply with whatever it is they're doing. Like, who do I matter to? Like, who's going to care enough if I shift or do this or do that? And, but I want to validate that your career was meaningful and important and you did amazing things.
Well, and let's go back to my feeling at mile 17 CIM. Like, let's go back to that Colleen Quigley Steeplesquigs mindset of like, you are the star of your own show and you are worthy of that. And so like, it doesn't matter if your audience is, 1,000 listeners or, 100,000 followers or whatever it is, whatever lane you're in, like you're allowed to go out as big or as low key as you want. I think I'm just more of a low key person. Not as flashy as sometimes it looks like on Instagram, back in the day when you're in a big training group and you're in a Diamond League race and you can be flashy. But I think I'm much more just like under the radar than that as a person.
I think that I'm going to have to really lean into that Colleen Quig. I mean, I'll never look like a supermodel like Colleen Quigley, but like I think I really need to like lean into that mindset. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody like give that anecdote or whatever, but I love it so much, and now I'm like, I gotta get Colleen back on the show.
You do, and she probably would have be like, I don't know, she might like laugh at me if she like heard that, like I think that I channel her that way. But
Yeah, I love it.
compliment.
Yeah.
We were peers in the space. We were teammates in 2015 Worlds, and she's a great person. And I hope that all of her like endeavors go as well as they look on Instagram. But yeah, it's just something. It's good to have someone that you. I don't know. I think about this. Maybe I don't want to bring up being like, oh, because I'm a woman, but like I want to be able to have a moment where I can like look in the mirror and say like, you're a badass. Like, let's go do this. Walk into this Zoom meeting or go to the toddler playground with your kid and like just own your space. And so be you. So that's we all kind of need that little like superhero moment. And so.
Totally. I was just like, I did this Instagram story the other day, and I was talking about like getting more eyes on track and field and Michael Johnson's thing that he's doing. And then I was like saying like how can we tell more stories? Like, for instance, like your story being highlighted in bigger ways when you were competing, things like that. And then after I put the story up, I was like, who was I to voice my opinion? Like, who was I to talk about this? And I had these like gross, annoying doubts that like I didn't deserve to like have an opinion or like thoughts on that. I'm like, Lindsey, what are you doing? Like, why do you care if people do or do not think that you deserve to have a voice in this? And why do you think you don't? Why do we do that to ourselves?
I don't know, but I know I've always done that to myself. And so I'm here, I'm validating you, Lindsey. You have a voice, you're using it, your platform is amazing. I think we all
do that.
We all do this in whatever context.
Yeah, so stop doubting yourself, friends, and you do deserve to take up that space. I think we should talk a little bit about the 2015 Worlds team that you were on, because we should talk about the really big moments that you got to celebrate and that will always be on that line on your Wikipedia page or whatever. So talk about that moment and what that meant in the holistic view of your career.
Yeah, like thinking back to just making that team, oh my gosh, like everyone who's doing the trials, and tonight, the steeplechase final, to give context for when we're recording this, but I'm super emotional because this is going to be a fresh team of Olympians. Like,
totally.
We have our 3 former Olympians who are not competing. So sad and devastated for them, but gosh, like I'm going to be on pins and needles this whole race of like who's going to make it. I am already again getting goosebumps again. But to take me back to 2015, you just know, like my coach at the time, Robert Gary, from Furman, he and I would talk about how success was the culmination of opportunity and preparation. When preparation is opportunity, that's where success is. And so I was really fit. We had worked really hard. He's a 2-time Olympian in the steeple, so I trust everything that he gave me. I just did what he told me, and we were ready, and I had an aggressive race plan. I was an aggressive racer back then, getting on Emma and just like following her as long as I could until she had that other amazing gear and dropped everybody. But I did that. I crossed the line. I was second, and I made that team. I crawled across the line. I was so tired at that point. But and then to get, fast forward, get to Beijing. I had been on the 2011 world team before too. I was an alternate that got called in at the last minute. So I had been on that world stage as a college senior.
Wow.
And so I just felt prepared for the moment. I felt like I had done the preparation and the opportunity was there. I guess I just have this like huge smile on my face, remembering and being in that final. And yeah, like the race played differently than we thought. It was kind of like a slow, faster, and we thought it might start fast. And anyway, it just, but finishing in ninth ninth in the world. I can't. I couldn't have done anything more in that moment. I put it all out there, and it was so cool. And that was the first time we had not just all 3 U.S. women make the final at the World Championship. We had all 3 U.S. men steeplers make the final. And so that was really cool to have like a full team in the final of the steeple. Yeah, it was just really, I just think that I was part of this really, really cool era of steeple specifically, but track too, where nowadays the U.S. distance athletes are so dominant. Like we're talking about like, oh, is Elise Cranny going to win a medal? Like, I was there when Emily won a medal, and Molly, like she outleaned Molly, like it just, that was a first for.
Oh my gosh, that was the 2015 World Championships when Emily Infeld medaled.
Yes. And so just like, and our 800 meter girl, like we just, right now the U.S. is like dominant across the board, and I got to be there for like seeing those pieces like start coming into place, and it just feels really cool. There's times where I wish that I was like 3 years younger, and then I would have some super shoes or some like different level of sponsorship. And sometimes I wish I was older, where like it was all new and you could just run like 10 flat in the steeple
and you'd be like the one.
But I'm so just like grateful for the place that I was put in and the era I was put in, because I don't know, there was also just this grittiness to it. I know athletes are gritty now, don't get me wrong, but like we didn't have all the like, it was just different. Maybe all the older athletes say that, like back in the day, we had to go uphill both ways. But every next generation gets things done a little bit differently and maybe a little bit better. Comes with different pressures too. But I'm biased, but I loved my era.
I love that so much. You're so right though. Like because I'm a little bit older than you, but like same thing with like all these big marathons. I'm always like, it was so different early on in the early days. Like everything's changed so much. I'm like, Lindsey, just like go with the times, man. Like,
yeah, I don't want to be like that grumpy old person, like shaking my fist, like you and your super shoes and your fancy agents and your deals, but like.
It's endearing though to think back to like what it was. I think that's special because that moment in time matters.
I can remember my like first trip to Europe, again, like that like 5th year senior of college, just like getting a ticket to, I think I was going to Switzerland, and just like, where do I go? I land, no one told me where to go. How do I find the race people? I like wandered around for an hour. Like my cell phone didn't work, like it's just so different now. Everyone's so connected and dialed in, and you can see everything like via social media. That's another, like that is a privilege and a struggle, I'm sure, a pressure and a privilege.
Oh, for sure.
Put everything on Strava, put all your training out there, like everyone can judge that. I hide my Strava, like especially now when I'm running like barely, but.
Oh, I want to see your Strava. Don't hide it.
Here's the caveat. I do so much stroller running.
Yes.
You're out of this phase, but so many of my miles are stroller miles.
Oh, yeah. I live that. But I would always just write it on the title. I would be like stroller run, or I'd be like, better yet, double stroller run. Because let me tell you, that double stroller is way harder than the single.
Let's get into what was the one you used? Was it the Bob?
Yeah, I used the Bob. I actually still have it sitting out here. I can like see it out my window. I have like so much crap that I need to just like get rid of that's out there. But I mean,
let me Venmo you for that, and you can just mail it out to me.
Oh, you don't want it. Nobody wants this Bob. I mean, we always say like, I wish that we would have put an odometer on it, because my husband also did a lot of stroller running with it. I mean, I've done 20-mile runs with that thing. Yep. Just like, it's in, 5,000 miles? I don't know. It's got a lot of freaking miles on it. Yeah. The double Bob, not so much. I never really enjoyed a double stroller run.
I will say that we saw the other day this couple, and she was pushing like they were running. He was pushing the double, and she was pushing like a littler baby, more
Uh-huh.
like the bassinet style, which I'm like, I
Yep.
don't know if you're supposed to run with that, but they're
We did
running.
it.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, three kids, parents running. I'm like, that's some goals out there.
Yeah.
So,
We at one point got a triple, and because my oldest was 6 when my youngest was born, he had just turned 6. So I mean, like my 6-year-old now, he's almost 6. I would never put him in a stroller for a stroller run, but at the time, he was my oldest, and we couldn't leave anybody home, obviously. So Glenn would push the triple, and I would push the single, and we did that for about a year. But yeah, I would say that the double to the triple was similar. The single to the double felt like a bigger jump.
yeah,
I love a single stroller run, but not. So that's the other thing. We lived in Indy, and it was flat, pancake flat. Now in Raleigh, I'm like, I don't know what I would have done for stroller runs. Like that would be so hard.
yeah, where we are out
Is
here.
it hilly?
It's hilly, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
tough.
yeah, yeah. It's and also like the downhill, you don't want to just like send it and like risk
You gotta be
anything.
careful.
Yeah, yeah. See, downhill running, that's scary. But
Yeah.
we could have done an entire hour on just the mom talk here.
Oh,
So
for sure. I know.
turn it into your mommy podcast now.
Well, I know. I actually like maybe offline, maybe more of an offline conversation, but like I actually think I'm gonna like just kind of combine the two. I really do, because I just like managing both, and I'm like, whatever. Tuesdays you can put out more parenting focused stuff, and everybody can know on Fridays if that's all they care about is the running, they get the running on Fridays.
There are so many athletes, not just runners, but so many parent athletes out there too that like
Yeah.
you could fill a podcast
I
with
think,
them.
yeah, I think that like, and then if people are just here for the running, they can just come on Fridays. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I also want to interview other athletes and stuff too, like outside of running. So
Yeah,
there might be some
changes.
changes coming here. We'll see.
Sneak peek.
So you're working with David Roach?
I am.
Okay. And so you've kind of like Furman. I know you're working with Kim Conley and Drew, and now David. What has the like coaching relationship been like for you with all your different coaches?
I really value having like a strong personal connection with the coach. I was so close and so in sync with Coach Robert Gary and his wife Rita, and like, you know, we were just so in sync during my time with Furman Elite. When I was with Kim and Drew, like it was just me and Kim. You know, they had their bigger group at a certain point, but it was just literally me and Kim. I lived down the street from them. We would drive to practice together. You know, I would walk out the door and run together. I was really close with Kim ever since she made, 2012 when she made that first team. So that was great. And then I went back to Robert to try and see if I could kind of get after this 2020, 2021 Olympic trials, and again, injuries just kind of held me back too much. But from there, I did quickly shift to David. I love him and his wife. They actually had their kiddo, their first kiddo is just a few weeks younger than mine. So we kind of went through that together.
Aw.
And they're expecting a second. I think that's another part of the challenges of being a mother runner is like, we do want to expand our family. So there's a little part of that where I'm like, well, we're in our trying to conceive era. Like, how hard do I really want to train? And how, like, do I want to set a race goal when I'm actually like really hoping to have another kiddo? And so I hope I'm pregnant in that month and can't run, so that's
so hard.
Yeah, that's a challenge. So yeah.
I just like, sorry, I kind of interrupted you. I was just like so resonating with that because it's like you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket in case it doesn't work out for some reason. But then at the same time, you're like, what if it is going to happen? Like, I don't want to like go all out. And it's like, gosh, like that's one of those things with family planning. Like you can't go all in either way because you can't assume anything's going to happen either way.
100%.
It's so hard emotionally too.
Exactly. And then, like, yeah, I mean, again, this is the mom podcast right here. This is that content, but yeah, it is really emotional, and I'm trying to be very casual about this, like, early teen phase of, like, we're just going to go with the flow. We're just going to see what happens. I can stress later, but let's just take a few months to just, like, try, have fun. But it's hard to not care, right? Or not to be, like, emotionally invested in, like, oh, what am I feeling? What is that? Like, it's just so, yeah, so that makes another challenge for training and for motivation and for, getting after it.
I think that's just another thing there is just like, that's why this is like woo woo, whatever, but like just, we always hear people talk about like being present. And that's why, like, at this phase, like, instead of being like, I want to do this, in 6 months I want to do this, and in 1 year I want to do this, it's like, what's happening today? How do I feel today about this? Do I want to work really hard today?
Lindsey, that is my challenge. I always have the 5-year plan, the 4-year cycle, right? The, like, Olympic cycle. We're going to do this race and this race. We're going to focus on this event, and then we're going to get back and qualify and make the team, like, that just is how my brain works as a track person. And so it's so hard, to let go, but that's what so much of parenting and life is. So
yeah, so much unknown. Okay, we have to wrap up here. What is something professionally or personally that you have not done that you would like to do?
Yeah, I think it'd be the ultra. So
yes. Love that. 50K. Yes. On the horizon. We don't know when, but it'll happen.
It will happen.
What's the best, most recent book you've read?
Lindsey, I really just read, like, parenting books right
nice.
now. The potty training book. Have
you read any good ones? Any good parenting books?
I liked a lot of the, like, Montessori toddler, Montessori baby. Again, we're reading the Oh Crap potty training book. And yeah, thinking about it, like, I do have a fiction book that Demon Copperhead that I was like,
oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
you have to read it.
I know. I've started it. It's intense.
It's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's sad, but it's really good.
Yes. So anyway, lots of, I read Curious George with my kiddo. We're in a deep Curious George phase. So all kinds of recommendations there for anyone in any stage of life.
Well, I will tell you, I was the laziest potty trainer known to man, so I have no advice there, not that you asked. But I remember on my 4th time around, finally, we had just moved here to Raleigh, and he was just about to turn 3 and still in his diapers, and we were trying to get him out. And my friend Emily sent me this, like, 18-page, like, guide to potty training, and I was like, girlfriend, I have done this 3 times. This is my 4th time. We are just riding this out until it happens. I am not doing any kind of boot camps where we stay home for 3 days. And I never was willing to do that with my other ones too, but I do hear people do it and it's very successful. I just had kids in diapers really late and just, went with it.
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't gone aggressively into it. There's times where he, like, wants to sit on the potty, but we haven't, like, had any action, but it's like, okay, we're just getting you comfortable. Let's just...
They give you teases sometimes, too, where you're like, I think they're ready. And then you're like, wait, what happened? I thought like, sometimes they tease you. I had a neighbor at our old house she was the grandma, and she swore to me that she potty trained her 9-month-old granddaughter.
I've heard people...
Yeah, and I was like, okay, well, this is not a world I will ever be living in. You're amazing, but... don't judge me when you see my almost 3-year-old still in a diaper.
It's like, yeah. And with all parenting, everyone has choices, right? And, like, no judgment on how anyone wants to do it. So
those boot camps, though, I think they work. So I will fully support you if you ever do it. It's like, what, you don't leave the house for like 3 days and they don't wear anything or something like that.
The naked weekend. I think
yeah.
We'll see if we have a weekend.
You might as well try if you have it in you and you can tag team with your husband.
Yeah. Naked stroller running for him.
At least one of you gets out of the house. Like, one of you goes grocery shopping. You got to get away somehow. Right. Okay, what is your last message to leave with our audience? You know what? Actually, I haven't asked this question in a while. Do you have a nonprofit you like to support?
Oh gosh.
I should have prepped you for that.
Yeah, you should have prepped me. No, love Girls on the Run. Love it. And have like ever since my early days of being a pro. And it's just great because there's always going to be one in your region. They do amazing things, and like that is what we're all about. Is like elevating women in sport. It starts as being a kiddo and being introduced to it and exposed to it and seeing strong women, seeing your mom out there. I'm all about that.
Yeah, and I'll just add one note to that. I've been talking about a lot about youth sports a lot, and the youth sport culture is so crazy. It's so expensive. It's so exhausting, and people go crazy because they want their kids to make like high school teams. Like literally they'll do so much travel soccer, all these travel sports, very expensive, and then their kid doesn't make the team and they give up on sports. And that makes me so sad. And I think with a program like Girls on the Run, it has nothing to do with making any teams. It has nothing to do with what kind of star player you'll be. It's about instilling the love of movement, the love of friendship and teamwork and all the things that like we want for a lifetime. So yeah, I'm like more passionate about that than ever in this age of like crazy youth sports.
Yeah, absolutely. All for it.
I just felt like I had to like
let's do it.
Rage on that a little bit. Last message to leave with the audience.
Yeah, I do affirmations with my toddler, and it is the sweetest thing to hear him. 'Cause now there's ones, and the two that are stuck in his head the most that he always will start yelling out at bedtime are, I am worthy and I have purpose. And it kind of like ties a bow on everything we've been talking about here of like, you are valid, your feelings are valid, your experiences are, like, you don't have to be an Olympian to be worthy. You don't have to be, you know, the star CPA to have a purpose. Like, it can be whatever it can be whatever it needs to be. So you're worthy and you have purpose. I think if everyone truly felt that deep in their soul, we'd be in a little bit of a different world.
You are an everyday hero. I love that. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Lindsey. I'm so thrilled to be on with you, and this has been so much fun. I'm ready to be on the mom side of the podcast. Let's do that one next.